The millionaire locks the door and discovers the black beggar, who was never touched by anyone. It was nasty out, a real Chicago night. Rain slickening the streets, wind howling like a banshee. Emily Harris, just a regular gal trying to make ends meet, was soaked to the bone. She dashed for the bus, missed it by a hair, and now here she was, back inside Sterling Enterprises, mopping the marble floors of Richard Sterling's fancy pants office. Richard Sterling, the big boss, the guy who probably thought money grew on trees. She never expected to see him tonight of all nights. Then bam, he storms in. A regular thundercloud. Cell phone glued to his ear, yelling about some deal gone south. He slams the door, and that lock, click, it echoed in the huge empty office, loud and final, like something out of a movie. Suddenly, poof, the lights went out. Total darkness. Great, Emily muttered. Of course, tonight was the night the power decided to give up the ghost. Richard Sterling was not happy. "What the devil?" he barked, fumbling for his phone. Dead. He looked like he was about to explode. Emily, though, she was used to this kind of stuff. Always prepared. She pulled out her little flashlight from her bag. "Backup, generator's probably out," she said, shining the light around. Happens sometimes. The flashlight beam danced across the room, catching the expensive furniture, the awards, the view of the city twinkling below. And Richard Sterling, his face all tight and angry. They started arguing, of course. He blamed her, even though it wasn't her fault. She shot back, telling him he needed to chill. And then, for a second, something weird happened. A look passed between them, a flicker of something. He looked almost human, vulnerable. He even started to say something about the pressure he was under, the stuff he had to deal with. But then, scratch, scratch, scratch. A faint scratching sound coming from behind a locked storage room door. Emily swung the flashlight. There, barely visible in the dim light, were charcoal markings on the old wood. Weird symbols, ancient-looking. "What's that?" she asked, a shiver crawling down her spine. Richard Sterling went white. "Nothing," he said, his voice tight. "That room's always locked. Just old files." But Emily remembered stories her grandma used to tell. Stories about the city's hidden past, secrets buried beneath the skyscrapers. And that scratching sound, it was getting louder. Who or what was behind that door? And what was Richard Sterling really hiding? Antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer um alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. "What's that?" she asked, a shiver crawling down her spine. Richard Sterling went white. "Nothing," he said, his voice tight. "That room's always locked. Just old files." But Emily remembered stories her grandma used to tell. Stories about the city's hidden past, secrets buried beneath the skyscrapers. And that scratching sound, it was getting louder. Who or what was behind that door? And what was Richard Sterling really hiding? He was sweating now, Richard Sterling, big drops beating on his forehead. He looked like he was about to faint. "Look, Emily," he stammered, just forget you heard anything, okay? This stays between us." "Forget? With that scratch, scratch, scratch getting louder? No way." "What's in there, Mr. Sterling? What are you so scared of?" He didn't answer, just stared at the door like it was about to swallow him whole. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. Dead silence. You could hear a pin drop. Then, crack! The old wood splintered. The door swung inward, slowly, creaking like something from a horror movie. And there, standing in the doorway, wasn't some monster, wasn't some ghost. It was a kid, a little boy, maybe 10 years old, covered head to toe in soot. He was skinny, like he hadn't eaten in weeks, and his eyes, they were huge, black and empty, like looking into void. Emily gasped. "Oh my God!" Richard Sterling just stood there, frozen, like he'd seen a ghost. The kid didn't say anything, just stared back at them, his eyes darting between Emily and Richard. Then he spoke. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in years. "Dad?" Emily's head snapped towards Richard Sterling. "Dad? This filthy, neglected kid was Richard Sterling's son? No freaking way." Richard Sterling crumpled. He sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands. "Oh, God," he sobbed. "They were right. It's happening again." "Mr. Sterling?" Emily was totally lost. What the heck was going on? He looked up, his face a mess of tears and sweat. He's my son. My first son. I thought he was dead." Dead? This was insane. This was beyond insane. Then the kid spoke again. "You promised, Dad. You promised you'd come back for me." And that's when the lights flickered back on. Everything flooded with bright, fluorescent light. And something else. Something weird. The kid. He wasn't covered in soot anymore. He was shimmering, like a heat haze. And his eyes, they were glowing. He took a step forward. And then he vanished. Poof! Gone. Richard Sterling screamed. A raw, animal scream that echoed through the entire office. Emily stumbled back, clutching her chest. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it would burst. What in the living hell had just happened? Richard Sterling was on the floor, rocking back and forth, muttering to himself. "It started! It started! They're coming!" Coming? Who was coming? What was he talking about? She had to get out of there. Now. Emily turned and ran, stumbling through the darkness towards the elevator. She didn't stop running until she was out on the street, gasping for air, the rain washing over her face. She looked back at Sterling Enterprises, the building looming against the night sky. The lights were all on now, shining bright, but something felt different. Something felt wrong. What had she just witnessed? And what was Richard Sterling so terrified of? She had a feeling this was just the beginning. And whatever was coming, it was going to be bad. Really, really bad. She kept running, the rain plastering her hair to her face. Each raindrop felt like a tiny ice pick. She just had to get away. Away from the office. Away from Richard Sterling. Away from whatever that thing was. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her best friend Sarah. "You still at work? Want to grab a pint? Burger?" Emily's fingers trembled as she typed back. "No. Something crazy happened. Can't talk now. Meet me at O'Malley's?" O'Malley's was their spot, a dive bar where the beer was cheap and the stories were wild. Maybe a burger and a shot of whiskey was exactly what she needed. She burst through the doors of O'Malley's, scanning the room. Sarah was already there, nursing a beer. Relief washed over Emily in a wave. Someone normal. Someone who hadn't just seen a ghost kid vanish into thin air. "Em, you look like you've seen a—" Sarah started, then stopped, her eyes widening. "Whoa, what happened?" Emily slid into the booth, the vinyl cold against her skin. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." Sarah raised an eyebrow. So Emily did. She told her everything. The locked office, the power outage, the scratching, the kid, Richard Sterling's breakdown, the vanishing act. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from amusement to concern to outright disbelief. "Okay," she said slowly, when Emily finally ran out of breath. "Okay, so you're saying Richard Sterling has a secret kid he keeps locked in a storage room, and then the kid disappears? And now Sterling's mumbling about what? Ghosts?" "That's the short version," Emily said, grabbing a napkin and wiping her face. Sarah shook her head. Honey, maybe you're working too hard. Maybe you need a vacation." "I wish," Emily sighed. "But I swear, Sarah, I'm telling you the truth. And something's seriously wrong with Sterling. I think he's in danger." Just then, the TV above the bar flashed an emergency news bulletin. The anchor's face was grim. "We interrupt this program for an important announcement. Earlier this evening, Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, was found dead in his office. Initial reports suggest a possible suicide." Emily's breath hitched. "Suicide? But he was terrified. Not suicidal. Terrified." Sarah gasped. "Oh my God, Em." Emily stared at the screen, her mind racing. Suicide? Or something else? She reached for her phone, a sudden, chilling realization dawning on her. She scrolled through her contacts, her thumb hovering over Richard Sterling's name. She hadn't deleted it. She wasn't sure why. She pressed the call button. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, someone answered. But it wasn't Richard Sterling's voice. It was that raspy, childlike voice. "Hello?" Emily's blood turned to ice. Who is this?" she stammered. "He said you would call," the voice whispered. "He said, you're next." The line went dead. Emily dropped the phone, the screen shattering on the floor. She stared at Sarah, her eyes wide with terror. "He's not dead," she whispered. "He's not dead, and he knows about me." Suddenly, the lights in O'Malley's flickered, then went out. Total darkness. A single spotlight illuminated the stage at the back of the bar. And there, standing in the spotlight, wasn't the karaoke singer who usually belted out cheesy pop songs. It was Richard Sterling. But it wasn't the Richard Sterling she knew. His eyes were black, empty, and glowing with an unnatural light. His skin was stretched tight across his bones. He looked ancient. He smiled, a slow, terrifying smile that revealed teeth too sharp. "Hello, Emily," he said, his voice a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the entire bar. "It's time we had a little chat." "Hello, Emily," he said, his voice a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the entire bar. "It's time we had a little chat." Emily scrambled back, knocking over her stool. Sarah screamed. People were frozen, staring, their faces pale in the flickering light. What was this thing? "Run, Sarah! Run!" Emily yelled. But Sarah was glued to the spot, eyes wide with terror. Sterling, or whatever this was, started moving towards them, slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Emily grabbed a bottle of beer from the table and hurled it at him. It shattered against his chest, but he didn't even flinch, just kept coming. She had to get Sarah out of there. Emily grabbed Sarah's arm and yanked her towards the back door, pushing through the terrified crowd. They burst out into the alley, the cold night air hitting them like a slap in the face. "What the hell was that, Em?" Sarah gasped, stumbling. "I don't know," Emily said, her voice shaking, "but it's not Sterling anymore." They ran, their breath clouding in the cold air, the sounds of screams and crashing, glass echoing behind them. They didn't stop until they reached Sarah's beat-up Corolla. "Get in!" Sarah fumbled with the keys, her hands trembling. They jumped in, Sarah jammed the key into the ignition, and the engine sputtered to life. She slammed the car into reverse and peeled out of the alley, tires screeching. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, her heart still pounding. "Anywhere but here," Sarah yelled, her eyes glued to the rear-view mirror. "I'm not sticking around to find out what that was." They drove for what felt like hours, finally ending up at Sarah's tiny apartment. It was a dump, but it was safe, for now. They collapsed on Sarah's couch, both of them shaking and silent. The weight of what they'd just witnessed was crushing. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay, this can't be happening. This is insane." Sarah nodded, her face pale. "I know. But I saw it too, Em. I saw what he looked like. That wasn't Richard Sterling." "But what was it?" Emily asked, her voice rising. "What was that thing?" Suddenly, Sarah's eyes widened. "The kid," she said, her voice trembling. "The kid you saw in Sterling's office. What if he did something to Sterling? What if he possessed him?" Possessed? It sounded crazy. But then again, everything that had happened that night was crazy. "But why?" Emily asked. "Why would he possess Sterling?" Sarah shrugged. "I don't know. Revenge? Maybe Sterling did something to him. Maybe he locked him away for years, like you said." Years. The word hung in the air. Emily fought back to the kid, his soot-covered face, his huge black eyes. "He called Sterling Dad," she said, her voice barely audible. "Yeah, but—" Sarah trailed off, her brow furrowed. "No," Emily said, a chill running down her spine. "No, it doesn't make sense." "What doesn't make sense?" Sarah asked, confused. "Sterling said they were right. It's happening again," Emily repeated, the words echoing in her mind. "He said he thought his son was dead. But what if he wasn't talking about the kid we saw? What if he was talking about himself?" Sarah stared at her, her mouth open in disbelief. "Wait, are you saying Sterling was possessed before?" Emily nodded, her face grim. "And that kid, the kid we saw? What if he wasn't Sterling's son? What if he was Sterling when he was a kid. Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide with horror. That's impossible. Is it? Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Is it really? Suddenly, the lights flickered, then went out. They were plunged into darkness. And then, a voice, a small, raspy voice, coming from the corner of the room. You're right, the voice said. He was talking about himself. Emily and Sarah gasped, scrambling back, their eyes darting around the room. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows. A young man, maybe in his early 20s. He was handsome, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile. Hello, Emily, he said, his voice soft and gentle. My name is Daniel Sterling, and I'm Richard Sterling's son. Emily stared at him, her mind reeling. But Richard Sterling said. Daniel Sterling shook his head. He lied. He always lied. He had to protect me. Protect you from what? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Daniel Sterling's smile faded. His eyes darkened. From himself, he said, his voice barely a whisper. From the thing that lives inside him. The thing that's been passed down through our family for generations. The thing that turns us into monsters. He paused, took a deep breath, and looked directly at Emily, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. And it's happening to me, too. And it's happening to me, too. Emily's head was spinning. Generations? Monsters? What the actual hell was going on? Sarah looked like she was about to pass out. Daniel Sterling took a step closer, and Emily could see the fear in his eyes. Real, raw fear. Look, I don't have much time. It's starting. I can feel it. Feel what? Sarah finally managed to choke out. The hunger, Daniel said, his voice cracking. The need to feed. Feed? Emily's stomach lurched. Feed on what? Daniel's eyes flickered. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you have to stop it before it's too late. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. It looked ancient, like something from a museum. This, he said, holding it out to Emily. This is the key. It's the only thing that can stop the transformation. Emily reached for the locket, her fingers brushing against Daniel's. A jolt, like static electricity, shot through her. She gasped, pulling her hand back. Daniel flinched. It's reacting to you, he said, his voice strained. You have to take it. You're the only one. Suddenly, the apartment door burst open. Standing in the doorway was Richard Sterling. The thing that used to be Richard Sterling. His eyes were burning with black fire, his face contorted into a horrifying grin. Daniel, he hissed, his voice a guttural growl. You can't hide from me forever. Daniel's face went white. Get out of here, Emily! Take the locket and run! Emily didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her towards the fire escape. They scrambled out the window and onto the rusty metal steps, the wind whipping around them. They were halfway down when they heard a blood-curdling scream from inside the apartment. It was Daniel. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't just leave him. We have to go back, she said, turning to Sarah. Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide with terror. Are you crazy? We'll be killed. I can't just leave him, Emily insisted. He gave me the locket. He trusted me. Before Sarah could argue, Emily turned and started climbing back up the fire escape. She had to help Daniel. She had to stop this thing. She reached the apartment window and peered inside. The scene was like something out of a nightmare. Richard Sterling, the monster, had Daniel pinned against the wall. He was feeding. His sharp teeth were sunk into Daniel's neck, and Daniel was screaming, a high-pitched, agonizing scream. Emily's blood ran cold. She had to do something, now. She fumbled with the locket, trying to open it. It was locked tight. She tried again, her fingers trembling. Finally, with a click, the locket sprung open. Inside, there was a tiny, folded piece of paper. Emily unfolded it, her eyes scanning the words. "He's not your son." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. What? What did that mean? He wasn't her son? But Daniel had said. Suddenly everything clicked into place. The jolt when she touched Daniel. The locket reacting to her. Sterling's words. They were right. It's happening again. Daniel wasn't Richard Sterling's son. She was. The scream died in Emily's throat. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. Her father, this monster, was her father? The realization was so profound, so earth-shattering, that she almost didn't notice when Richard Sterling, her father, turned and looked directly at her, his black eyes burning with an unholy light. He smiled, a slow, terrifying smile. "Hello, darling," he said, his voice a low, guttural growl. "I've been waiting for you." And then everything went black. "Hello, darling," he said, his voice a low, guttural growl. "I've been waiting for you." And then everything went black, not like passing out, not like falling asleep, black like nothing. Then flashes, images, a woman's face, young, beautiful, but with eyes full of terror. A baby, tiny, helpless. A dark ritual, chanting voices, shadows dancing on the walls. Then, pain, screaming pain, tearing through every inch of her body. It felt like her bones were breaking, her skin was burning, her soul was being ripped apart. Emily gasped, her eyes snapping open. She wasn't in the apartment anymore. She was somewhere else. A dark, dark place. Emily gasped, her eyes snapping open. She wasn't in the apartment anymore. She wasn't in the apartment. A dark, dark place. Dank. Chained to a wall, her wrists raw and bleeding. Sarah was slumped on the floor beside her, unconscious. Richard Sterling, her father, stood before her, his eyes glowing with malevolent glee. But something was different. He wasn't feeding anymore. Daniel was gone, vanished. "Welcome home, Emily," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "It's time you learned the truth about your family." He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that sent shivers down Emily's spine. "You see, Emily, the Sterling family isn't just rich. We're special. We're the chosen ones, chosen by something ancient, something powerful." He paused, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism. "We're the guardians of a gateway, Emily. A gateway to another world. And every generation, one of us, transforms. We become something else. Something stronger. Something more. Emily stared at him, her mind reeling. Gateway? Transformation? This was insane. This was beyond insane. Daniel knew too much, he continued, his voice low and menacing. He was trying to stop it, to break the cycle, but he couldn't. No one can. He stepped closer, his eyes boring into hers. And now, Emily, it's your turn. You're the next guardian. You're the one who will unlock the gateway. You're the one who will become more. He raised his hand, and in it, he held a silver dagger. The blade was glinting in the dim light, and Emily could see ancient runes etched into the metal. "This dagger," he said, his voice a whisper, "this dagger will unlock your true potential. It will release the power that lies dormant within you. It will transform you into the monster you were always meant to be." He lunged. Emily screamed, closing her eyes, bracing for the pain. But it never came. Instead, she heard a sickening thud, and then silence. She opened her eyes. Richard Sterling was on the floor, the silver dagger sticking out of his back. He was gasping, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Standing behind him was Sarah. But it wasn't the Sarah she knew. Sarah's eyes glowed with the same unholy light that had possessed Sterling, but somehow more intense, more knowing. She smiled, a slow, terrifying smile that revealed teeth too sharp, too long. "Sorry to interrupt," Sarah said, her voice a low, guttural growl. "But I couldn't let him spoil the surprise, now could I, Emily?" She advanced towards Emily, the silver dagger dripping with blood. "You see, darling," she said, "the Sterling family isn't the only one with secrets." She paused, her eyes locking with Emily's. "I'm not Sarah. Sarah died a long time ago. My real name," she purred, "is Lilith, and I'm your mother. My real name," she purred, "is Lilith, and I'm your mother." "My mom? But the woman in the flashes, the one who looked terrified, that was Lilith? That was this thing?" My head swam. But how?" I choked out. "My dad, he—" Lilith, my mother, laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the cellar. "Oh, Richard was just a pawn, darling, a useful idiot. He thought he was in control, protecting the gateway. He had no idea I was pulling the strings all along." She moved closer, the silver dagger still dripping. "The Sterlings, bless their simple little hearts, have been guarding this gateway for centuries. But they never understood its true purpose. They thought they were keeping something out, when all along they were supposed to be letting something in." "In? Letting what in?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lilith's eyes glowed brighter. "Power, Emily. True, unadulterated power. A power that will reshape this world. A power that will make us gods." She reached out and touched my cheek, her touch cold and clammy. "And you, my darling daughter, are the key. You're the perfect vessel, a Sterling by blood, but with a unique connection to the other side." "Other side?" I repeated, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what she was saying. "Oh, yes," Lilith purred. "There's more to this world than you can possibly imagine. And soon, very soon, you'll see it all." She raised the dagger again, her eyes fixed on mine. "Now, Emily, it's time for your transformation." I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the pain. But then, a new voice. "Not so fast, Mom." Lilith froze. I opened my eyes. Standing in the doorway of the cellar was Daniel. But not the scared, desperate Daniel I'd seen in the apartment. This Daniel was different, confident, calm, powerful. And he was holding a gun. A big, silver gun, pointed directly at Lilith. Lilith's face twisted with rage. "Daniel, what are you doing? You're supposed to be dead." Daniel smirked. "Almost were, thanks to you. But I had a little help escaping your affections." He gestured with the gun towards the shadows behind him. A figure stepped forward. A woman, young, beautiful, but with a haunted look in her eyes. "Mom?" Daniel said softly. "You remember my real mom, right? Before you replaced her." Lilith snarled. "You traitorous little—" Daniel cut her off. "Enough talk. This ends now, Lilith. You've manipulated and controlled people for far too long." He took a step closer, the gun steady in his hand. "Time for you to face the consequences." But then, something happened. Something completely insane. The chains holding me to the wall, they started to glow. A bright white light burning like the sun. And then, the light exploded. The force of the explosion threw everyone back. The cellar shook. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. I screamed, shielding my eyes. When the light faded, everything was different. The chains were gone. I was standing, free, and I felt different, stronger, more alive than I'd ever felt before. And I wasn't alone. Beside me, shimmering into existence, were figures, tall, dark, and impossibly powerful. Their eyes glowed with the same white light that had freed me. They were angels, demons. I had no idea, but they were on my side. I could feel it. Daniel and his real mom were staring at me, their faces a mixture of awe and terror. Lilith was on the floor, scrambling back, her eyes wide with fear. What is this?" she stammered. I looked down at my hands. They were glowing with the same white light. I could feel the power surging through me, raw and untamed. I looked at Lilith, and for the first time, I saw her for what she truly was. A scared, desperate little girl, playing with forces she didn't understand. And I knew, with absolute certainty, what I had to do. "It's over, Lilith," I said, my voice echoing with power. "Your game is over." I took a step towards her, and the figures beside me followed. Lilith screamed and lunged at me with the silver dagger, but I didn't even flinch. I simply raised my hand, and everything went white. Eu simplesmente levantei a mão, e tudo ficou branco. Só que o branco não era o fim, era o começo de outra coisa. De repente eu sabia de tudo, a história da minha família, a tal da chave, o portal, e sabia que Lilith tinha mentido de novo. O portal não era para deixar algo entrar, era para trancar ela, porque Lilith não era minha mãe. Minha mãe de verdade era a mulher que tinha ajudado Daniel, a que estava ali, assustada, no canto. Lilith era outra coisa, uma coisa que tinha invadido a vida da minha família, roubado a identidade da minha mãe e que agora queria usar o meu corpo para se libertar de vez. E as tais figuras que estavam do meu lado não eram anjos, nem demônios. Eram os guardiões, os de verdade, os que protegiam o portal. E eles estavam ali para me ajudar a fazer o que tinha que ser feito. Olhei para Daniel. Ele estava me encarando, com os olhos arregalados. Acho que ele também tinha entendido que a gente tinha sido manipulado o tempo todo, que a história que a gente conhecia era uma mentira. Daniel, eu falei, minha voz saindo estranha, diferente. Preciso que você faça uma coisa. Ele assentiu. Meio zonzo. A chave, eu disse, não é a corrente sanguínea Sterling, é o sacrifício. Alguém tem que querer trancar o portal. De verdade. Alguém que tenha ligação com a Lilith. Alguém que... A ficha caiu na hora. A ligação. A única pessoa ali que tinha uma ligação de sangue com a Lilith era... Não, Daniel falou balançando a cabeça. Não, Emily, não faz isso. Mas eu já tinha me decidido. Peguei a adaga da mão da Lilith. Ela estava paralisada sem entender nada. Era a minha chance. Me desculpa, eu falei para Daniel. Mas não tem outro jeito. E cravei a adaga no meu próprio peito. A dor foi horrível, claro, mas foi rápida. E enquanto a minha vida escorria, eu vi. Vi o portal se fechando. Vi a Lilith gritando, sendo puxada para dentro, de volta para o lugar de onde ela nunca devia ter saído. E vi Daniel. Vi a dor nos olhos dele. Mas também vi alívio. Ele sabia que eu tinha feito a coisa certa. E aí, tudo ficou escuro de novo. Mas dessa vez, era um escuro bom. Um escuro de paz. Ou pelo menos, era o que eu achava. Porque de repente, eu acordei. Num lugar estranho. Parecia um quarto de hospital, mas com umas máquinas esquisitas, luzes coloridas. E tinha alguém sentado do meu lado. Um cara de jaleco branco, com uma cara familiar. Finalmente acordou, ele falou, com um sorriso. Estávamos preocupados. Você ficou em coma por 20 anos. 20 anos? Coma? Que porra estava acontecendo? Quem é você? Eu perguntei a voz rouca. O cara sorriu de novo. Pode me chamar de Dr. Sterling. E você, minha querida Emily, você é o nosso maior sucesso. E aí ele apertou um botão, e a parede atrás dele se abriu. E lá dentro, eu vi. Vi um monte de gente. Gente como eu, ligada a máquinas, com os olhos brilhando. E vi o que estava escrito na parede. Projeto Guardião. E pela primeira vez, eu senti medo de verdade, porque eu não tinha a menor ideia do que estava acontecendo, nem do que eu tinha me tornado. Projeto Guardião. E pela primeira vez, eu senti medo de verdade, porque eu não tinha a menor ideia do que estava acontecendo, nem do que eu tinha me tornado. Onde estou? Consegui perguntar, a voz um sussurro. O Dr. Sterling sorriu, um sorriso que não alcançava os olhos. Bem-vinda ao futuro, Emily. Um futuro que você ajudará a construir. Ele me guiou pelo corredor, ignorando minhas perguntas. Cada passo era um choque, o chão frio sob meus pés descalços. As pessoas ligadas às máquinas, algumas pareciam tranquilas, outras contorciam-se em agonia silenciosa. O que você fez com eles? Nós os aperfeiçoamos, Emily, assim como faremos com você. Ele parou em frente a uma sala diferente das outras, mais clara, mais limpa. No centro, uma maca, e sobre ela, um reflexo. Eu, mas não era só um reflexo, era uma cópia, exata, e estava viva. Impossível. Nada é impossível, Emily, com a tecnologia certa e a motivação correta. O Dr. Sterling gesticulou para minha cópia. Essa é você, Emily, a versão aperfeiçoada, livre das emoções e das fraquezas que te impediram de alcançar seu verdadeiro potencial. Eu estava em choque. Uma cópia? Eles fizeram uma cópia de mim? Mas... por quê? O que você quer? Foi então que a porta atrás de nós se abriu, e quem entrou me fez engasgar. Era Daniel, mas não o Daniel que eu tinha visto morrer. Não o Daniel que tinha lutado contra Lilith. Este Daniel era diferente. Frio, calculista. Seus olhos, antes tão cheios de esperança, agora eram gelo puro. Daniel, eu disse, minha voz tremendo. Ele me ignorou, dirigindo-se ao Dr. Sterling. O processo está completo, doutor. A cópia está estável. O Dr. Sterling assentiu, satisfeito. Excelente, Daniel. Excelente. Agora podemos finalmente dar início à fase final do projeto Guardião. Fase final? O que estava acontecendo? Onde eu estava? E por que Daniel estava agindo daquele jeito? Daniel, por favor, eu implorei. O que está acontecendo? O que eles fizeram com você? Ele finalmente se virou para mim e o olhar que me lançou me quebrou por dentro. Não havia reconhecimento, não havia compaixão, apenas desprezo. Você não entende, Emily. Nunca entendeu. Isso é maior do que você, maior do que nós. É sobre proteger o mundo. Proteger o mundo? Mas do quê? Daniel sorriu, um sorriso frio e cruel. De nós mesmos, Emily. De nós mesmos. E então, ele revelou a verdade. A verdade que mudaria tudo. A verdade que transformaria a história da minha vida em um pesadelo sem fim. Lilith estava certa, Emily. Havia algo do outro lado. Algo muito, muito poderoso. E não era para ser trancado, mas sim controlado. Ele fez uma pausa, me encarando nos olhos. E eu, Emily, eu sou esse controle. O quê? Eu sou o portal, Emily. Eu sempre fui. E você é a chave para abri-lo completamente. Não, não pode ser. É a verdade, Emily. Uma verdade que sua família escondeu de você por gerações. Você e eu somos o elo entre os dois mundos. Juntos podemos trazer uma nova era de poder e prosperidade. Você está louco? Daniel riu. Louco? Talvez. Mas sou o único que pode salvar este mundo. E você, Emily, vai me ajudar. Ele se aproximou, estendendo a mão. Junte-se a mim, Emily. Juntos governaremos. Juntos seremos deuses. Eu olhei para minha cópia, para o Dr. Sterling, para as pessoas ligadas às máquinas. E então olhei para Daniel, o homem que eu pensei amar, o homem que agora era a personificação do mal. E eu soube o que tinha que fazer. Com um grito de raiva, eu me joguei para cima dele, tentando agarrá-lo. Mas ele era forte demais. Ele me jogou no chão com um golpe. Você sempre foi um erro, Emily. Ele disse, com desprezo. Mas não se preocupe, sua cópia será muito mais útil. Ele fez um sinal para o Dr. Sterling, que se aproximou com uma seringa. Eu lutei, gritei, mas era inútil. Eles me dominaram e injetaram o líquido em meu braço. Tudo começou a girar. Minha visão embaçou. Senti meu corpo fraquejar. Antes de desmaiar, vi Daniel sorrir. Um sorriso de vitória. E ouvi suas últimas palavras. Adeus, Emily. Obrigado por tudo. E então a escuridão me engoliu. Mas desta vez não era a escuridão da morte. Era a escuridão do medo. A escuridão da traição. A escuridão do desconhecido. E eu sabia, no fundo da minha alma, que o pior ainda estava por vir. Eu acordei de novo. Uma dor lancinante na cabeça. O mundo girava. Que droga estava acontecendo? Eu estava num quarto, branco, limpo, sem janelas. Parecia uma cela. A porta se abriu. Daniel, mas diferente. Um sorriso frio no rosto. Vejo que acordou, ele disse, a voz calma. Pensamos que tínhamos te perdido. O que você fez comigo? Ele riu. Eu te salvei, Emily. Dei a você uma nova chance, uma nova vida. Ele se aproximou, acariciando meu rosto. Eu me afastei. Não me toque, eu disse, a voz cheia de ódio. Você ainda não entende, não é? Isso é para o seu bem, para o bem de todos. Ele se virou e saiu da sala. A porta se fechou atrás dele. Eu estava sozinha, de novo. Eu precisava sair dali. Precisava descobrir o que Daniel estava planejando. Eu me levantei, cambaleando. Meu corpo doía. Meus músculos estavam fracos. Eu caminhei até a porta e tentei abri-la. Trancada. Eu chutei a porta, gritei, mas ninguém veio. Eu estava presa. De repente, uma luz, vinda do teto. Uma luz forte, ofuscante. Eu olhei para cima e vi um rosto. O meu rosto. Mas não era o meu rosto. Era o rosto da minha cópia. A cópia que Daniel e o Dr. Sterling tinham criado. Ela sorriu. Um sorriso vazio, sem emoção. Olá, Emily, ela disse, a voz fria e calculista. Temos muito que conversar. Ela começou a descer, lentamente, flutuando no ar. Eu estava apavorada. Quem era ela? O que ela queria? Ela pousou no chão, na minha frente. Nossos olhos se encontraram, e naquele momento eu entendi. A cópia não era apenas uma cópia. Era algo mais. Algo pior. Ela era Daniel. Daniel tinha transferido a consciência dele para o corpo da minha cópia. Ele tinha se tornado outra coisa. Algo que eu não conseguia nem imaginar. Agora você entende, Emily? Ele disse, usando a voz da minha cópia. Eu sou o futuro. E você? Você não passa de um fantasma do passado. Ele se aproximou, estendendo a mão. Junte-se a mim, Emily. Deixe-me te mostrar o que podemos fazer juntos. Eu olhei para ele e vi a escuridão. A escuridão que tinha consumido Daniel. A escuridão que agora ameaçava engolir o mundo. Eu sabia que tinha que detê-lo. Mas como? Eu estava fraca, indefesa, presa. De repente, uma ideia. A chave. A chave para o portal. Não era a adaga. Não era o sacrifício. Era a escolha. A escolha de trancar ou abrir o portal. E eu sabia qual escolha eu tinha que fazer. Eu respirei fundo, olhei para Daniel nos olhos e sorri. Você está certo, Daniel, eu disse, a voz cheia de determinação. Eu quero me juntar a você. Ele sorriu de volta, um sorriso de vitória. Ele se aproximou e me abraçou. E foi naquele momento, enquanto ele me abraçava, que eu sussurrei no ouvido dele. Eu escolho trancar. E então, tudo ficou branco de novo. Mas dessa vez, era o fim. Ou será que não? Ei, você chegou até o fim? Uau! Isso significa que você é um verdadeiro fã. E como um verdadeiro fã, você precisa se inscrever imediatamente no canal para não perder as próximas histórias exclusivas. Esmague o botão de like agora para alimentar o algoritmo e mostrar seu apoio. Inunde a seção de comentários com teorias sobre o final. Eu quero saber o que você achou. E não espere nem mais um segundo para compartilhar este vídeo com pelo menos 5 amigos que precisam conhecer este desfecho. Este é o momento para demonstrar seu amor por histórias incríveis. Então vai lá e compartilhe. Apenas os verdadeiros fãs entendem a importância de apoiar o canal com estas ações. Então não me decepcione. Nos vemos na próxima.